Part 1. The message. The text arrived soft and warm, the way only lies can. My phone lit up in my hand, and for one foolish moment, I let myself smile the way I had smiled for years whenever Raymond decided to be tender through a screen. Stuck at the office. Happy 36th anniversary, sweetheart. Those were his exact words, and while I was still reading them, still sitting in the amber glow of that restaurant, purse beside me, a glass of water sweating into the linen, my husband was 3 tables away, leaning across another woman's space like he had nowhere else on earth he'd rather be. His mouth met hers without hesitation, without shame. The room did not go silent the way people describe in moments of shock. It actually got louder. Forks met plates. Someone laughed near the bar. A server passed carrying drinks on a tray that trembled only because my own hand had begun to shake. I could not breathe right for what felt like a very long time. My eyes kept trying to reassemble the scene into something forgivable, a wrong angle, a cruel coincidence, a woman who only resembled someone I knew. I have lived long enough to understand that sometimes the mind races ahead of the truth, and sometimes it drags its feet. Mine dragged. It sat heavy and stubborn, while my body had already accepted what my heart refused to name. My name is Margaret Holloway. By the time that message came through, I had already been seated alone for 35 minutes at a table meant for 2. I had come early on purpose. 3.5 decades of marriage teaches a woman how to arrange her expression before disappointment arrives. I told myself traffic was impossible. I told myself work had run over. I told myself that men who spend years being depended upon begin to treat punctuality like a favor rather than a courtesy. I told myself a great many things in those 35 minutes, because sometimes the small lies you whisper to yourself are the only things keeping the larger ones from rushing in. I looked back down at his message, and then back up across the room, just to punish myself with certainty. He was still there, dark jacket, silver threading through his hair, catching the candlelight. One elbow near the edge of the table, a posture I recognized instantly, relaxed, familiar, proprietary. The kind of ease a man carries when he has no fear of being seen. The woman across from him was not startled. She was not ashamed. She leaned toward him like she had already claimed that space as her own. Then she turned her head slightly, just enough for the light to catch the side of her face, and my breath left my body completely. If you're listening right now, stay with me. Because what I saw next changed everything, and what came after that changed even more. Part 2. The name. I knew her before I could even say her name out loud in my own mind. Serena, my daughter-in-law, Marcus's wife. The woman who had stood in my kitchen just 4 nights earlier, both hands wrapped around a mug of tea, smiling the way polished people smile when they want to seem warm without being open. She had told me she hoped this anniversary would give Raymond some real rest. He's been working so hard lately, she had said. Working so hard. I stared at her mouth, still soft from kissing my husband, and something cold slid through me so cleanly it almost felt like clarity rather than pain. I did not cry. Tears belong to moments when pain still needs permission to enter. This one did not ask. It walked in like fact. A waiter appeared beside me and asked if I'd like a few more minutes before ordering. I heard myself say yes in a voice so steady it frightened me. He nodded and disappeared. Across the room, Raymond reached for Serena's hand, not quickly, not carelessly, the way a man reaches for something that has long since become routine. I sat there with my wedding ring warm against the stem of my glass, and I understood something that women who have been quietly diminished for years come to understand sooner or later, that loneliness is not the absence of company. Loneliness can wear a pressed blouse and lipstick and sit in a restaurant looking perfectly composed. I watched because once truth shows itself, looking away does not make you innocent of what you've seen. Raymond said something that made Serena lower her eyes and smile, not a bright public smile, but a private one. The kind that grows between people over months, not moments. My stomach turned slowly, carefully, as if trying not to alarm the rest of me before it was ready. I looked again at his message on my phone. Happy 36th anniversary, sweetheart. The cruelty of it was never in the lie itself. It was in the ease with which he told it, from the same table where he was kissing another woman, without so much as a moment's pause. Serena lifted her face once more. This time there was no angle left to hide behind. My chair scraped hard against the floor as I pushed myself up. I didn't plan it. My body moved before the rest of me finished deciding. One second I was sitting there, phone still glowing in my hand, and the next I was stepping out from behind my chair, with all the heat in my chest rising so fast I felt it might undo me. My legs were unsteady, but they were not weak. There is a kind of shock that does not freeze a woman. It moves her forward. But before I could reach them, before I could say a single word, someone stopped me. And what they said changed the entire direction of that night. Part 3. The Waiter. A hand touched my arm. Not hard, not rude, just enough to interrupt the next step. I turned so sharply, I nearly pulled away before I realized it was the waiter who had offered me more time before ordering. Up close, he looked younger than I had first thought. Early 30s, maybe. Clean apron, careful face, the kind of expression people wear when they are trying to stop someone from falling without embarrassing them in the process. He lowered his voice immediately. "Ma'am, please, just give it a second." My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. His hand dropped away at once, but he did not step aside. He leaned in just enough that I didn't have to strain to hear him over the sounds of the room. "I've seen them here before," he said. "Please stay calm." Everything in me went hot and then cold. I simply stared at him. Of all the things I had imagined that evening might bring, those words were nowhere among them. Seen them here before. Not once. Not accidentally. Before. The floor beneath me felt less steady than it had a moment ago. And that scared me more than my own anger did. Because anger I understood. Anger had shape and edges. This new thing had neither. It spread. "You've seen who here before?" I asked, though I already knew what he meant. His eyes moved past me toward their table, then back, quick and uneasy. "I'm sorry," he said, and I could hear that he meant it. "I just think if you go over there right now, you'll regret it." Regret it. The nerve of that sentence should have sent me straight past him. Instead, it caught on something deeper. Because people don't say things like that unless they believe something worse is still unfolding. I looked over my shoulder. Raymond had settled back in his seat. Serena was speaking to him, low and close, her face composed in a way that made my skin crawl. There was no panic between them. No sudden separation, no one scanning the room. They were still comfortable, still settled, still behaving like two people who had arrived together and expected the night to continue. That was what slowed me down. If I had stormed over then, I would have walked into a situation they were already prepared to manage. I would have handed them chaos, and chaos is a gift to people who are practiced at lying. It lets them grab at confusion and call it explanation. The waiter stepped back, careful, as if he knew he had already said more than was safe. "I'm sorry," he said again. Beneath the humiliation and the rage, beneath the sick feeling still working its way through my chest, something else had quietly started to form. I turned around and walked back to my table. I sat down without taking my eyes off them, and I decided to watch. Because what happened next, what arrived at that table, was something I had never expected, and it told me more than any kiss ever could. Part 4. The Envelope. The kiss was not the worst part. I learned that sitting perfectly still, hands folded too neatly in my lap, heart beating hard enough to make the edges of the room feel thin. Once I sat back down, something in me shifted, not healed, not softened, sharpened. The pain was still there, hot and humiliating, but now it had company, a cold, careful attention. I watched Raymond settle deeper into his chair like a man who had crossed a line long ago and found it easier to stay on the other side than to attempt the return. I watched Serena lower her voice when she spoke to him. Her posture was relaxed in a way that no longer belonged to secrecy. What unsettled me most was not what they were doing, it was what they were not doing. They were not checking the room, not once, not the door, not the surrounding tables, not the mirrors behind the bar. People hiding something look over their shoulders. People who feel safe don't. That was when I understood the waiter hadn't stopped me to protect them. He had stopped me because something else was coming. A man approached their table. He did not arrive the way strangers arrive, searching for their seat, uncertain of their welcome. He moved with the quiet certainty of someone expected. Dark jacket over a pale shirt, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm, and something about the way he carried himself tightened something low in my chest. Not fear, but recognition. My body knew him before my mind did. Then he stepped fully into the light, and I placed him. 2 years earlier, I had sat beside Raymond in a private downtown office while this man introduced himself as someone who handled sensitive medical coordination for clients who preferred discretion, not treatment, verification, paternity testing, private lab results, things people did not want moving through their regular physicians. His name was Leonard Vance. He opened the portfolio and removed a sealed brown envelope, flat, unmarked, deliberate. The kind of exchange chosen by people who believe no one in the room has any reason to look twice. He placed it directly into Raymond's hand, not to both of them, not even angled toward Serena, to Raymond. There was no conversation around it, no hesitation about whether this was the right place. That alone told me more than anything the envelope could contain. This had already been discussed elsewhere. This was not news being delivered. This was a conclusion being confirmed. Raymond didn't wait. He opened the envelope immediately, slid the papers out in one smooth motion, and scanned them the way a man searches for a single answer he has already spent weeks living with. His eyes moved quickly, stopped. Then he exhaled, not heavily, not dramatically, just enough. Then I heard him, low and certain across the quiet room. So it's confirmed. Confirmed. Not discovered, not questioned, confirmed. The word entered me with the kind of cold clarity that pushes everything else to the side. This was not a beginning. It was not a turning point. It was the closing of a loop that had already been running long before I ever walked into that restaurant. And what happened next, what Raymond did after he read those papers, that was the moment I finally understood the full shape of what had been hidden from me. Part 5. The touch. Gerald straightened slowly and moved toward Serena's chair. Not quickly, not nervously, deliberately. He stopped, beside her. Not close enough to make a spectacle, but close enough to belong there. His hand moved without searching, without hesitation, and came to rest against her stomach. Light, familiar. Not the touch of a man testing limits, but the touch of a man returning to something he already recognized as his. I felt my breath shorten, not in panic, but in something tighter and more precise. My eyes fixed on that single point where his hand met her body, and the rest of the room began to fade in importance. There was a pause between them. Not long, but intentional. The kind of silence that exists between two people who no longer need words to understand each other. Serena's shoulders softened beneath his touch. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else in that room would notice. But I noticed. When you have lived alongside a man for more than 3 decades, you learn the language of his hands. And I knew, in that quiet second, that he had touched her this way before. Then he bent, not quickly, not nervously, and pressed his mouth gently to the place where his hand had settled. It was not a performance. There was no exaggerated tenderness meant for an audience. It was quiet, controlled, almost private despite the room full of people surrounding them. And in that moment, everything aligned with a terrible, clean precision. The envelope, the lab, the word confirmed, his relief, her stillness. My mind did not fight what was in front of it this time. It followed it, calmly. The way you follow something you already know to be true, but haven't yet allowed yourself to say aloud. She was pregnant. That was the first truth. And the second arrived not as a guess, but as a quiet certainty. Raymond had not been surprised by what those papers said. He had been relieved. He had arranged the test himself. He had waited on the results. He had been living with the possibility long enough to need proof. This was not a mistake they were both struggling to recover from. The test had already been taken. The question had already been lived with. This meeting, this envelope, this quiet exchange, it was not the beginning of anything. It was the continuation. A strange calm spread through me then, steadying my hands, smoothing the sharp edges of what I was seeing into something I could hold without falling apart. I was no longer watching an affair unfold. I was watching a pattern, something built, something maintained, something that had existed long enough to become entirely comfortable. Serena looked up at Raymond, and in her expression there was no fear, no guilt. What I saw there was agreement, the kind that does not need to be spoken because it has already been decided somewhere else. I had seen enough. Some betrayals do not need noise. They need time. And what I did next, how I walked out of that restaurant, and what I chose not to do when I arrived home, that was the first decision that would change everything that followed. Part 6. The performance. By the time I got home, the night air had cooled, but my skin still felt warm in ways that had nothing to do with weather. I let myself into the house as quietly as if I were the one sneaking back from something shameful. The porch light was on. I had left it burning out of habit before dinner, and seeing it there waiting for me made something ache low in my chest. That small yellow light had welcomed me home through funerals and graduations, through storms and quiet Tuesday evenings when nothing of consequence had happened at all. Tonight, it watched me walk in alone. I set my bag on the entry table and stood still, listening. The refrigerator hummed faintly from the kitchen. The old clock in the hallway moved forward with the same patient certainty it always had. And then something small caught my eye. Raymond's shoes were not by the door. They were always there by this hour, angled slightly toward the wall, never quite straight, as if he had always meant to fix them and never had. Tonight that space was empty. It wasn't proof of anything by itself, but it didn't belong to the version of the evening he would later describe. I went to the bathroom first and looked at myself in the mirror. My lipstick had faded at the center. My eyes looked too bright, not from crying, but from the sustained work of holding tears back. I pressed a cool, damp cloth to the sides of my face, not because I was crying, but because I needed to lower the heat. I needed my body to stop behaving like it might betray me before I was ready. That was the first decision I made that night. Not to forgive, not to understand, to conceal. I changed into something comfortable, turned on the lamp in the sitting room instead of the overhead light, and settled into my usual chair with a book open in my lap, though I never read a single line. I was not waiting for Raymond to come home. I was preparing the version of myself he would meet when he did. When I heard his key in the door, my heart gave one hard beat and then steadied. His footsteps were unhurried, the sound of a man returning from an ordinary evening. He loosened his tie as he walked through the hall, glanced toward the sitting room light, and smiled with the ease of a man who had left nothing behind him. "There you are," he said. I looked up from the open book and gave him a small smile that cost me more than rage would have. "Here I am." He crossed the room and bent to kiss my cheek. I let him. That may sound like a small thing, but women who have lived long enough know the quiet violence of holding perfectly still when every nerve in your body wants to recoil. He sat down across from me and exhaled like a man setting down a weight he had grown used to carrying. Work was a mess. Traffic on top of that. I hated missing tonight. His voice was smooth, not overworked, not over-explaining. That was what made it worse. A clumsy liar leaves evidence in their panic. Raymond had come home, polished. "We'll celebrate properly this weekend," he said. "I'll make it up to you." I nodded once. I figured something held you up. And beneath my composed exterior, I had already made my second decision. I would not ask him for honesty. I would study him instead. Because the question burning in me now wasn't just what I had seen. It was how long it had been happening. And the answer to that was already starting to surface. Part 7. The pattern. I began remembering. That is an uglier thing than searching in some ways. Searching gives you the dignity of action. Remembering forces you to sit still while old moments rise up one by one and quietly ask why you let them pass as ordinary. The morning after the anniversary dinner, I lay in the blue quiet of our bedroom and listened to Raymond breathe beside me, like a man untouched by anything. His phone was on the nightstand, face down. Raymond had never once slept with his phone face down. Not in 36 years. I looked at it for a moment, then looked away. I was not ready to touch anything yet. After he left for work at his usual time, same routine, same cufflinks on the dresser, same brief kiss on my forehead, I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee and watched him back down the driveway with one hand loose on the wheel, calm as a Sunday morning. There was something almost offensive in how practiced his normalcy was. I did not tear through drawers or dig through pockets like a woman in a cheap television drama. That was never going to be me. I wiped down the kitchen counters, watered the plant by the dining room window, folded the throw from the sitting room. My hands kept moving, while my mind kept returning to things I had filed away as small annoyances, little disappointments not worth turning into arguments. One by one, they came back wearing different faces. The late evening phone calls were the first thing I reconsidered. Raymond had developed a habit over the last year of stepping outside after dinner to finish something on his phone. Not every night, just often enough to feel incidental. He always said work had grown more demanding, that people expected immediate responses, that staying reachable was part of maintaining his standing. I had believed him. Men like Raymond build entire identities around being needed. But now I remembered something I hadn't let myself notice before. He never took those calls when Marcus was home. Only when the house was thinner, quieter, easier to manage, and Serena had missed enough dinners to form a pattern of her own. Migraines, errands, a friend visiting, something that needed returning before a store closed. Little reasons, polite reasons. Once I let the dates arrange themselves honestly in my mind, they stopped looking separate. That afternoon, I went to the study and opened the drawer where we kept household financial records. I was not hunting for evidence. I was checking what had always been mine to check. At first glance, nothing alarmed me. No large transfers, no obvious purchases. But betrayal rarely begins in large gestures. It begins in repetition. There were withdrawals, not large enough to trigger concern individually, but consistent enough to feel intentional. Same spacing, similar amounts. The kind of money that disappears quietly and explains itself easily if anyone asks. Lunch meetings, small gifts, work expenses. I could hear Raymond's explanations before he ever offered them. That is what 36 years buys you. Not just memories, predictable lies. What made my chest tighten was not any single withdrawal. It was the pattern, money leaving softly, the same way he left explanations behind, just enough to satisfy, just vague enough to survive one glance, not two. That evening, as the light dimmed against the windows, I understood something I had not wanted to know. This wasn't sudden. This hadn't started recently. And the worst part, the part that sat heaviest, was that I had been living inside it while it was being built. But remembering wasn't enough. What I needed next was a second pair of eyes, and I knew exactly where to find them. Part 8. The Truth in Daylight. I went back to the restaurant the following afternoon, early enough that the dinner crowd hadn't started, late enough that the room still carried the faint after-scent of coffee and expensive choices. The hostess offered me a table with a professional smile. I declined. "I'm looking for one of your servers," I said. My voice was calm, almost detached, and that steadiness unsettled me more than trembling would have. He was working 2 nights ago, tall, close-cut beard. He spoke to me near the back dining room. Something flickered across her face, recognition, then caution. "Let me check," she said. A few minutes later, he came out from a side hallway. Without the evening rush around him, he looked even younger than I remembered, nervous too. His apron was gone, replaced by a black button-down with the sleeves rolled neatly to the forearm. He slowed when he saw me, and in that pause I understood he had quietly hoped I would not return. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "We need to talk," I said. He glanced toward the hostess, then toward the bar. Weighing something, finally. "I have 10 minutes on break. There's a small patio around the side." Outside, the afternoon air was sharp and clear. We stood near a row of empty metal tables beneath cream-colored umbrellas, away from the entrance. Neither of us sat. That more than anything made the moment feel honest. Neither of us was comfortable enough to settle into it. "I'm not here to cause trouble for you," I said. He looked at his hands before answering. That hesitation told me more than a smooth response would have. Smooth people protect themselves first. Hesitant ones are usually deciding how much honesty they can afford. "I shouldn't really be involved," he said. "You already involved yourself that night." He accepted that without argument. "I stopped you," he said slowly, "because you were about to walk into something worse." "How long have they been coming here?" I asked. He exhaled through his nose. "Months." The word landed heavily. Months meant habits. Months meant planning. Months meant birthdays, Sunday calls, and ordinary family dinners all threaded through with a second life running quietly beneath them. "They always asked for the back section," he continued. "Away from the windows. Not hidden exactly, just not visible from the front. They came regularly." He paused, then added the thing I could not unhear. "I thought you knew," he said. "The way they carry on, I assumed the people who mattered to them already knew." There it was, not suspicion, not gossip, assumption. The kind of assumption people only make when 2 people have been comfortable enough in public for long enough to stop looking like a secret and start looking like an arrangement. I let the silence sit between us. "The other night wasn't unusual," he said finally. "That's why I stopped you. I knew something else was coming. They don't come here like people doing something reckless. They come here like people with a routine." He looked at me directly, no polite distance left in it. "It wasn't the first time," he said. "Not by a long way." I thanked him. I walked back to my car and sat behind the wheel for a long time without starting the engine. By then I had enough to know I was not dealing with one desperate moment or one ugly lapse in judgment. This was a structure, built carefully, maintained quietly, and operated by people who had stopped being afraid of being seen. That realization changed everything about what I planned to do next. And the person I needed to tell first was the one who would be most devastated by it. Part 9. The Reckoning. I called Marcus on a Thursday evening, just before 6. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Ma, there are sounds your children make that never stop belonging to earlier versions of them." Marcus was a grown man, a mortgage, a marriage, the kind of tired shoulders that come with genuine responsibility. But when he said, "Hey Ma," in that particular way, I still heard the boy who used to call for me from the back steps when he scraped a knee. "I need you to meet me," I said. A pause. "Now?" "Yes." His voice became careful. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, and I hated how easily the lie came. "I just need to see you." I gave him the name of the restaurant. There was a long silence on his end. He knew what that place meant. That was partly why I had chosen it. I needed him in the same room where my life had split open. I needed the truth to begin where I had first seen it. "I'll be there in 20, he said. When he walked in, his face was open in that particular way decent people look when they believe bad news probably means illness, or money trouble, or someone gone. He had not yet imagined betrayal. He was still standing in the last clean doorway before it. He kissed my cheek, sat across from me, and studied my face. "You sounded strange on the phone." "I know." "Mom, what's going on?" I told him, carefully. In the order things had happened, the way you lay tools out before beginning a task you cannot afford to rush. I watched disbelief cross his face in stages, confusion first, then resistance, then something harder and more desperate as the shape of it became undeniable. When I spoke Serena's name, the color drained from his face. He pushed back, the way a person does when the mind refuses to settle somewhere painful. "That doesn't make sense. You had to have misread something. Serena wouldn't." I saw him kiss her. The words landed between us and stayed there. I did not rush to soften them. I did not reach for his hand. Some grief needs space to collapse cleanly before it can be touched. Then I set my phone on the table between us, screen facing him. The photograph was clear. Raymond's hand resting against Serena's stomach with the easy familiarity of repetition. Her body angled toward his without resistance or confusion. A private moment sitting openly in a public room. Marcus looked at it once, then again, his jaw tightened. His free hand pressed flat against his thigh. "She's pregnant," I said quietly, "and the child isn't yours." The room kept moving around us, a couple laughing near the window, a server apologizing somewhere behind us for a delayed entree. But our table had gone entirely sealed from all of it. My son forgot how to breathe for a moment. Then he came back slowly, rough and shallow at first, like his body had remembered at the last second that it still had to keep him alive, whether or not his heart was willing. "How long?" he finally said. "Long enough," I said, "that they were comfortable." He looked at me with eyes red at the rims but clear. "So what do we do?" That word, "we," told me everything I needed to know about my son. "We learn," I said. "And then we decide what they deserve once they've shown us everything." We did not raise our voices. We did not confront anyone that night. We made no phone calls, sent no messages, left no evidence that anything had changed. We simply sat in that quiet back section of the restaurant, the same room where the truth had first shown itself, and we chose something more powerful than anger. We chose patience. And what patience uncovered in the weeks that followed. The money, the lease, the second life already being furnished. That was what made the reckoning not just inevitable, but complete. Some truths don't shout, they wait, and then they remove everything, quietly.